As Democrats nominate Kamala Harris at their convention, Texans make their voices heard.
We deserve a president who can be a bright light in a sea of darkness.
Now there's evidence the race is tightening in Texas. Why that could have an impact deeper down the ballot. A new rule blocks Texans from changing the gender on their driver's license.
It makes me wonder how safe I am here.
We look into what's behind the order that tightens these restrictions. Texas school districts facing a budget crisis and tough choices over what to cut.
Looking at some of these things, they're devastating.
Our special report digs into what's at stake and why state lawmakers are divided over how to solve the problem.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Democrats celebrated Kamala Harris at their convention, and Texans played a powerful role. The opening night of the convention brought a rousing speech from Texas Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, but also a striking moment as Josh and Amanda Zerwoski addressed the crowd. They spoke about how they lost a baby to pregnancy complications and how Texas abortion restrictions put Amanda's life at risk.
Every time I share our story, my heart breaks. For the baby girl we wanted desperately, for the doctors and nurses who couldn't help me deliver her safely, for Josh, who feared he would lose me too.
The theme of reproductive rights continued during the roll call vote. Texas mom Kate Cox sent a message when the cameras turned to the state's delegation.
There's nothing pro-family about abortion bans. There's nothing pro-life about letting women suffer and even die.
Then on Thursday, the night Kamala Harris gave her acceptance speech, another Texas mom took the stage. Kimberly Mata-Rubio told the story of losing her daughter in the Robb Elementary School shooting.
Uvalde is national news. Parents everywhere reach for their children. I reach out for the daughter I will never hold again.
Mata-Rubio and 4 other Americans directly affected by gun violence spoke about their loved ones, calling for action on gun legislation. Also in the lead up to Kamala Harris's acceptance speech, Texas Congressman Colin Allred touted his campaign to defeat Senator Ted Cruz.
We will protect and restore reproductive freedom. We will secure the border. We'll protect Medicare and Social Security. And we'll turn the page and write a new chapter for this country. And let Kamala Harris be the next president and beat Ted Cruz.
Senator Cruz launched a campaign tour through Texas on the day after the Democratic convention ended. At a rally in Georgetown, he fired back at Allred.
We're a state that embraces common sense values, embraces the values of low taxes and low and reasonable regulations. We want to protect our safety. We want to protect our freedom. That's who we are, and I'm confident that's how Texas is going to vote in November.
As the campaign ramps up, we are getting a picture of how Texas could vote in November. New polling suggests that the race might be a little closer. Our Will Dupree has been following the developments this week. What does the latest polling show?
A survey done earlier this month by the University of Houston and Texas Southern University really sought to find out what Texas voters are feeling about 2 key races, the U.S. Senate seat and the presidency. Starting in that Senate contest, right now, the survey shows that Republican Senator Ted Cruz is only leading over Democrat Colin Allred by about 2 percentage points. That's virtually unchanged since the last survey was done back in June. And this is a very tight contest. It's within the margin of error. When we go to the presidential contest, that's where it's really interesting because Kamala Harris has only been the Democratic presidential nominee for a little over a month at this point. Pollsters have obviously been clamoring to find out how she's faring, not only nationally, but in some of these state polls. Here in Texas, this survey showed that she's trailing behind Donald Trump only by about 5 percentage points. She has shrunk his lead, according to the last survey, nearly in half. So this race is much more close than many people probably anticipated. And of course, more polls will be coming out as we get closer to the election and showing us how this dynamic, perhaps the excitement and enthusiasm she's generated so far, will affect the results in the state.
Yeah, we've heard some talk from Democrats about how this might be a sleeper battleground state. That seems far-fetched. You've looked, though, at the numbers a little bit closer. What are those chances?
Yeah, that phrase popped up on social media, sleeper battleground state, and trended for a little while. So it got us looking into this about how exactly true it is. Is it a possibility even this year? Texas Democrats have long claimed that the state is much more competitive than it has really shown in terms of a historical context. You know, a Democrat has not won statewide here in Texas in 30 years. The closest race was back in 2018 when Ted Cruz faced off against Beto O'Rourke. So history is not on the side of the Democrats at this time, but as these polls show, at least these early ones, the dynamics may be changing, and it's really fascinating to watch how this moves forward.
Certainly a campaign season that is heating up.
No doubt.
Thank you, Will. Another big story, the head of the Department of Public Safety is leaving after 15 years on the job. Steve McCraw announced his retirement Friday during a graduation ceremony for new cadets.
It's rather an easy thing to do because I know Governor Greg Abbott will ensure that my replacement is as good and likely better than I am at this particular job.
McCraw's announcement comes after more than a year of speculation about his future. He faced scrutiny in the aftermath of the 2022 Robb Elementary shooting in Uvalde. Families of the victims have pushed for accountability over how DPS responded to the shooting. Texas schools spending millions more than they're bringing in, asking state lawmakers for help. We look at the looming battle to get more money for public schools and the issue that's complicating the search for solutions. First, a new rule blocks people from changing the gender on their driver's license. We look at what led up to the decision and the effect it's having on transgender Texans. A new rule is now in effect that blocks Texans from changing the gender listed on their driver's license or state-issued ID. Previously, the Department of Public Safety would accept court orders or amended birth certificates to update someone's sex on a license, but on Wednesday, the department announced that process is no longer valid. One Austin man tells us he just applied for a court order to submit to DPS. Now he's left in a legal limbo.
It makes me wonder how safe I am here, and how, I don't know, how much longer I can even emotionally afford to live in Texas.
It's not clear what caused this policy change to happen now, but for context, it comes at a time when some state leaders have pushed for policies to limit the rights of transgender people. Ryan Chandler takes a closer look.
Late Wednesday night, DPS told us their policy change comes after the Attorney General's office raised concerns about the validity of the court orders mandating DPS to change an applicant's gender.
We think it's incredibly important that IDs in Texas are accurate instead of being based off of thought-perceived gender identification.
Conservatives praising the change and hoping more agencies follow suit. DPS's policy change is a reflection of the Texas Republican Party's official platform, which opposes all efforts to validate transgender identity. Some Republicans hope Texas passes a statewide ban against recognizing transgender identity.
I'm sure this will be something that is explored further by many members of the legislature.
But transgender rights lawyers worry the move denies equal protection to an already vulnerable group.
When you don't have identity documents that match who you are, that means it's hard for you to get housing, it's hard for you to have a bank account, it's hard for you to get health care.
Skeen anticipates legal challenges, if not on equal protection grounds, to assert the authority of these court orders. It may not be so easy for the Attorney General to tell state agencies to just ignore a court.
Judicial court orders are meant to be binding on state agencies.
Ryan Chandler, State of Texas.
For context, the license policy comes about a week after Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton sued the Biden administration over federal workforce protections for transgender employees. And in June, Paxton sued to block a policy extending federal Title IX protections to include sexual orientation and gender identity. As students return to class, Texas school districts are grappling with a growing budget crisis.
You can make an adjustment and save $22 million, $19 million, but at what cost?
Our special report looks into what's at stake for students and teachers. and what lawmakers say needs to happen to make sure schools get the funding they need. As students head back to class, many Texas school districts face a budget crisis. Superintendents bracing for cuts that could affect students and teachers if the state does not pass a new funding bill. In a special report, investigator Kelly Wiley and education reporter Nabil Ramadna dig into the debate as decision makers plan for another school funding fight.
You have a teacher and you have a teacher assistant in AISD. We're not making $120,000 a year. This is a very challenging community to be an educator in and have be a homeowner and to be able to keep your head above water financially.
You go, mija. Start to me.
This is a challenging city to be raising a family of 4 in.
Más alto.
¿Qué quieres que diga?
Teachers in AISD right now don't know exactly how much they're going to be making this year. We don't know if we're going to be getting a raise or not. Not because the school district doesn't want to, but because their hands are pretty tied. They have these expenses.
On July 23, 2024, facing a $119 million deficit, the Austin ISD School Board began discussing programs it could potentially cut to balance its budget in the future.
When I was watching it in July, it was very sobering. They had identified areas that could be cut if help doesn't come from the state or from a property tax increase.
Changing librarians to aides could see savings. And then, of course, there are stipends that districts provide.
I can tell you, a lot of those teachers might not stick around if you take away that stipend.
If we were to move away from doing one-way and two-way dual language, there could be some staffing.
Those areas are going to hurt specific schools. They're going to hurt certain populations.
The conversation around budget cuts is one school districts across the state are having after lawmakers failed repeatedly since 2019 to increase the funding per student, the basic allotment.
Our team began tracking how many school districts in Central Texas and beyond were passing budgets where they spent more than they had. Of the 24 Central Texas school districts, which have already adopted its budget for this school year, 18 are in a deficit. School budgets show the shortfalls range anywhere from $374,000 to $119 million.
We found big and rural school districts across the state are digging into their fund balances to give teachers raises and keep up with legally required programs.
If you look at our special education program as a whole, the state underfunds that program by $25 million.
As a former classroom teacher, looking at some of these things, they're devastating.
According to Austin ISD administration, even if voters approve a tax rate increase and the district is able to meet its goal of a multi-million-dollar budget cut, they would still be left with a $41 million deficit.
Hayes ISD is facing a $6 million deficit, and Round Rock ISD, through what it calls surgical but difficult cuts, was able to pass a balanced budget.
There's not much we can do after this year if our state doesn't change the way we fund public school. Really, we're pretty much stuck.
You can make an adjustment and save $22 million, $19 million, but at what cost? We could produce harm or introduce harm that we just are not, does that align with our values?
If we don't get more money or more funding for the state, we won't be able to give raises, for example, to staff and teachers.
My hope is that the kids don't feel it. I don't think I'm going to be that naive and say that they won't. I'm sure once we start school on Tuesday and as we progress through the year, we'll have to deal with some issues because you either have money or you don't to do certain things, and you want to sustain what you've been doing in the past, but at some point something has to give.
Okay. Once you make a cut in something, if it ever comes back, it sometimes takes years to come back. I don't know how it's going to turn out in the end. I really don't.
In January, lawmakers will have to act on mounting pressure to increase funding to public schools, but also on the governor's mission to create a program allowing state dollars to go to private schools. Both priorities fell short in the last legislative session.
We have the money approved in the budget for billions of dollars in addition for public schools.
Coming up, we sit down with a Republican leading the party's effort to create education savings accounts and a House Democrat fighting to stop the plan.
We are about 3 votes down in our effort to defeat vouchers.
The fight over school funding now taking shape at the Capitol. Our team found that many Texas districts are passing deficit budgets this school year. That sets the stage for difficult decisions over what to cut. State lawmakers now face pressure to increase public education funding and a push from the governor to pass a plan to let parents use public funds to pay for private schools. In part 2 of our special report, investigator Kelly Wiley and education reporter Nabil Ramadna get perspective from lawmakers on different sides of the debate.
I was asked today to provide an update on the state of public education. For about the next 5 years or so, total student enrollment in the state will essentially be flat, and with it ADA and many of the things that drive total cost of the school finance system. While we have the highest teacher salaries that we've ever had in raw dollars, inflation has been wiping out their wages and wage gain just like it has everybody else's.
We're dealing with a perfect storm, right? We never have gotten back to our attendance pre-pandemic.
Insurance costs go up, utility costs go up, every single thing, including salaries, has gone up. What I essentially am doing now as we move forward is making sure that we're insulated and not relying on what the state legislature may do, because they've proven to us that they're willing to do nothing.
And every day counts. Like every day a student is going home with less resources. We have to act with a sense of urgency.
What is your feeling, though, on all these districts that are passing deficit budgets going into the next school year?
Well, yes, I think they're difficult situations financially, of course, and it's certainly a result of negotiations that did not finalize in the last legislative session. I mean, we have the money approved in the budget for billions of dollars in addition for public schools.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to pass the bill that authorized the spending of that money because the governor insisted it be tied to a universal voucher.
Billions of dollars are sitting there. Superintendents and teacher organizations were testifying in committee, we'd rather not have it if school choice were to pass. 6 million public school kids, 40,000 education savings accounts. It's not a mandate. It's not mandatory that they go to a private school or use a school choice alternative. It's an option, and kids need options. Moms and dads need options.
The superintendents that I've spoken to seem to believe that even though this money was on the table, money that they have said that they need and want, that a school choice program would in some ways create funding issues for them anyway.
We had hold harmless provisions that still gave those districts the same funding as if those students were to remain in their seats, right?
For a limited time, right? It wouldn't have lasted.
Our budget's every 2 years. We don't obligate, we try not to obligate ourselves forever in the future because we don't know, but a lot of the superintendents, they didn't realize that till after session. That's why they're coming to me now saying, can we get that deal back that was on the table when session ended? Because that actually was a good deal.
The situation arises again where it's school choice or funding. What do you plan to do?
I'm still weighing the opinions of the new members coming in. I'm trying to listen, and we haven't made those decisions yet.
If vouchers is tied to more school funding, what do you do?
We are about 3 votes down in our effort to defeat vouchers because the governor took out the Republicans, many of the Republicans who were opposed to vouchers. Every family needs to do what's best for them. But when you start asking the taxpayer to foot the bill for schools where there's no accountability and there's no requirement that these private schools even take these students, shouldn't we ensure that our kids can access the best education they can at our neighborhood public schools when those are the schools that everyone is entitled to go to?
In 2019, under House Bill 3, Texas lawmakers increased a major source of funding, the basic allotment. School districts began getting $6,160 per student from the state, but the legislature has not increased the basic allotment in the 5 years since then, through a pandemic, inflation, and a historic teacher shortage.
Central Texas school leaders say they need at least a $1,000 increase to the basic allotment just to restore the purchasing power they had in 2019. But in lawmakers' most recent proposals to increase it,
Most proposed to raise the allotment by less than $100, and even those attempts failed.
I was shocked, honestly. I mean, I was shocked when they were talking about $50, $100. You know what $100 will do?
What do you think the basic allotment needs to come up to?
Well, I think in our budget we had a $65 to $70 increase in the basic allotment. But again, with the teacher pay raises, for most districts that number was really a $350 basic allotment increase. I think somewhere in between will be where we end up.
It's really that's not enough, not even close to be enough. I mean, we'll take it, obviously, we're desperate here, but like, honestly, that was not what we need. We need a lot more.
We aren't politicians, but we're having to deal with politics.
I feel like we kept, and our students are hostage until we figure out how to negotiate and come up with a deal. I don't think it should be done that way. It's an urgent matter for us to get more funding so we can take care of our students.
We asked Governor Abbott if he will advise lawmakers to again link school funding and education savings accounts. His press secretary told us Abbott has provided more funding for public education than any Texas governor, and added he will not stop until Texans have their voices heard and school choice is the law of the land. Thank you again for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. We'll be back next week to bring you an in-depth look at Texas politics.